What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Audiophiles Podcast.
I'm Malik, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined here today with Knox, one of the smartest experts in the business music field there is. We were so lucky to have Thomas Brunet, the composer for Chants of Sennaar,
Which we covered back in episode 2.
Oh yeah, just a few weeks ago. It was so great to have him on.
We replied to his comment and we said, do you want to talk about your work on the show a bit? And we're so excited to show it with you. Welcome for our first Composer Spotlight, Mr. Thomas Brunet.
So you just said something that sparked a question for me, which was in our industry. What industry do you see yourself being in? To what extent are you in the games industry? To what extent are you in the music industry?
I am very much in the games industry. Regarding marketing, like music marketing, I mostly market myself as a games composer, but I'm a music composer who happens to be a gamer and a lover of games and very much loves the way his career has taken him deeper and deeper into games. So I'm not saying I wouldn't write music outside of games. It's just the way things happened that I do have a love of games, and I guess I directed my efforts towards game music. But it wasn't a conscious effort of saying I want to be a game composer. I'd say I would have favored this if I had a choice, but then it's very complicated in France to be just a music composer.
Yeah.
Because if you work in films, you have to collect your royalties, what we call droit d'auteur. They're not exactly working the same way as royalties. And it can be a pain for game publishers to talk and to estimate what kind of money they would need to invest in a composer that's in the French PRO, called SACEM. Right. And if you are a member of SACEM, you can work in films because then you can collect your income, your royalties, because the upfront fees are very small compared to games. And in games, it's the total opposite. If you are a member of SACEM, then publishers and developers will shy away from you. And there's a very long history about this fact. And I know there are contracts between certain publishers like Ubisoft, which are obviously huge, and they can afford to have people in accounting who are paid.
They have accountants and lawyers.
Yes, and there are some heavy calculations to do when you're a huge publisher and you have several composers you have to pay royalties to, as opposed to percentages set by contracts. For instance, as I understand it, American law is very much what you get is what you write down on your contract.
Yes, there's an agreed split.
Yes. In France, the law kind of states that some, like TV, for example, they all pay rights to the PROs.
And
so
just to be clear, we're talking about publishing rights here, not the sound recording rights. Is that split up is separately in France as it is in the US?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sound like recording rights will belong to the person paying for the recording. But then
by the way, I'm just curious, as a side note, who owns the masters to Chants?
Rundisk.
Rundisk.
The masters.
Yeah.
Yes. As long as you have a trusting relationship, it doesn't really matter who owns them, because if I wanted to, for example, extend the soundtrack and do a second album with the remaining tracks that are in the game but not on the album, and I had the funds to do it, I just know they would say, oh yeah, do it.
Because so do you retain your publishing?
Nope.
So by that I mean the actual composition copyright. Do you retain that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. French law is very, very strict about this. Like, it's illegal to sell or otherwise give away your basic rights. Like, no one can say, like, ghostwriting would be totally illegal in France.
Wow. Yeah, that's totally different than how we have it set up in the US. Interesting.
Yeah, that's what I meant with the difference between royalties and what we have. So anyway, it's complicated, and people smarter than me have been working on this for at least 10 years now, and it's still ongoing. But yeah, I couldn't easily switch to, say, film score writing because of this legal predicament in France. And if I were to write music for an American film that's been screened all over the world, I would get my fair share and my income, but for the territories of France, it would be a bit of a pickle. Anyway,
Wow. So I love this nitty gritty conversation, because I think that these are the kinds of conversations that we need to be sharing with each other as musicians, as an industry, to kind of help each other out. But also the business of being a composer, that must be a very fine line to walk. And doing all this administration and royalties, as you're saying, and the marketing of it. But how does that ever get in the way of actually working on the art of it?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. At first, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You kind of learn from your mistakes, and fortunately, I didn't do any rash decisions or big mistakes. But this is, it's a fine line to tread. As you said, you're constantly fighting the urge to just leave it for other people to decide, and that's when possibly your career will not go the way you intend it to, because then anyone can decide for you. So you have to be knowledgeable about laws, and specifically music laws, and how they relate to the games industry, because these two industries I found are very much opposed to one another, at least from where I am in France. I would say the music industry is very attached to their way of thinking and their way of protecting artists. In the games industry, you will find a very software-centric philosophy. In software, in programming, for instance, royalties don't exist, and you wouldn't pay a programmer monthly fee for the exploitation of his work. But then artists, at least in France, musicians are used to it being the other way around, and it can create very deep confusion. I mean, to avoid this kind of confusion and a lot of efforts and a very long procedure to get to the bottom of it, even French publishers, games publishers, would have an easier time hiring a foreign composer.
I'm curious, if you could go back to like yourself when you were starting your career, what advice would you give yourself? What would you say? Hey, make sure look out for this kind of thing.
Look out for people who ostensibly tell you they're your friends, because usually friends don't really need to say that. And I've had a few adventures like this where you don't really need a contract. You don't really think things in advance, because we're doing things old school. I don't know.
We're friends. We're just buddies. Yeah.
Let's do it, man. This kind of discourse is fine if you don't intend to make it your career, because it's also fun to have side projects and just pick up the guitar and jam. But that's not what you want. If you want to make this into your career, you should run away from these people. Never start working without a contract.
That's a great specific piece of advice right there.
Yeah, and one of the things, maybe you'll tell me more and teach me about this, but I think I read something regarding music marketing specifically, where there's a difference, or marketing in general even, there's a difference between the price of something and the value of something. And people will associate the first number you tell them with the value of your work. And then if you say, okay, let's negotiate, let's see if we can't do like less music or less instruments in the music, or have more time, further away deadline, and then reduce the price. People will still associate your work with the first number you give them, which is the value. And my advice would be always give a first number which you think is slightly too much. And you're like, I would be satisfied with like 10% less or 5% less, but let's just be honest with ourselves, and it's a lot of work, and it's taxing. And in my case, I would have been inclined to do the opposite, being like, I'm starting out and I'm just a musician, I'm just a composer, and I do what I love. And society also incites you into this vicious circle where you're not really working, right? because you're not lifting heavy weights, and that's true. On the other hand, you're a highly specialized, highly dedicated professional, and you often work nights and weekend, although I don't do that anymore. But this would also be a great piece of advice to my younger self. Stop working at, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 p.m. Just stop answering your email, stop answering your Discord, disconnect, and go play a game, go live your life, go play with your kids if you have some. And also weekends, don't answer anything during the weekend. Some stuff, I never took it too far, but if you don't, as someone I love once said, being on your own, being a freelance, and being your own boss often means working for an imbecile. And so from your own mistakes as your boss, and you have to think, okay, I'm my boss. What would my boss say to me, and what would I say to my boss? And then if these two people can find a right compromise, then you're probably on the right track. But don't neglect mental health. Don't neglect sleep. Yeah, you see a lot of people being really proud of not sleeping or working late, and I can understand why they would do it. I'm not disparaging people doing it, because I can understand the amount of work coming your way, and there's no humanly possible way to do it without hiring an entire new team. So you have to hustle, and it's not by choice, I imagine. But then you also kind of get into the rhythm of it, and the more you say yes, the less you can say no.
Yeah.
And people get used to it. When people respect your boundaries, they can be your friends, because this is an industry where everyone is passionate, and they really want to make the best possible work of art. I really don't agree with people saying, "Oh my God, devs are lazy, and devs have an agenda," or whatever. They just want to make a great game.
Yeah.
And they want to do it while retaining their mental health and social lives.
Thank you again, Mr. Brunet, for hanging out with us. That was so much fun. The Audiophiles is a movement of people dedicated to elevating the stature of video game music,
And we're really, really excited to have your support. And until next time, play
with sound.